250 years ago, the Second Continental Congress was meeting just north of here in Philadelphia. They were drafting, debating, and revising a document that would then go on to change the course of history. I'm Marquardt in Washington. That was the Declaration of Independence. 13 colonies formally breaking away from Great Britain to create a new independent nation. Then, for nearly a decade, the newly formed United States of America fought Great Britain for independence. The leaders of the revolution gathered to establish the framework for this new nation. Written in 1787, the United States Constitution has become the world's longest living charter of government, affirming that the government exists to serve its people. That Constitution remains central to the country's identity today. Here's Al Jazeera's Rosalind Jordan with more on the ongoing effort to keep that document relevant.
And basically, this is the oldest remaining structure in Mecklenburg County,
where historians say in 1775, Hezekiah Alexander helped launch the cause of American independence.
The invasion of our rights as attempted by the Parliament of Great Britain. What he's doing at this desk, he's writing some of those founding documents. We're talking about the independence of Mecklenburg County and of North Carolina and eventually of the nation, and that intellectual activity right here.
Nolan Dom of the Charlotte Museum of History says years of British financial and political abuse, plus news of the battles at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, convinced North Carolinians and then other colonists to break away. The United States was born out of 13 British colonies in 1776, but it was the writing of the Constitution in 1787 that has shaped the country to this day. The framers of the 1787 Constitution opened the document with three significant words: "We, the people." The message? The United States would be governed by rules and policies endorsed by the people, not by a remote, unelected leader. That meant a Congress, a president, and a judiciary chosen with public input. But the framers knew the Constitution had problems. It was written by white men, some of whom were enslavers. Slavery was still legal. Women had no legal standing, and the government could still violate people's property and privacy rights. And so the framers included a process for amending the document. Now, after more than 200 years, 27 amendments have been added, guaranteeing free speech, religious freedom, and gun rights. Slavery is outlawed, women can vote, and individual legal rights are protected. The framers wanted to protect the Constitution from political fads, and so they deliberately made the amendment process a tough one.
The concurrent resolution is adopted.
2/3 of both houses of Congress and 38 states must agree.
They knew they were human. They were at the time writing about how conflicted they were about the direction of the nation, about how people might misconstrue their words in the future for their own political purposes.
Ultimately, the framers and many others, including Hezekiah Alexander, achieved a goal that has lasted for more than 2 centuries.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
A government intended to serve the people, not the other way around. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera, Charlotte, North Carolina.
That Constitution was inspired by the Declaration of Independence, which was really a bold vision for a new society where all men are created equal and all humans have the unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to many at the time, that was back in 1776, and of course still today, these were lofty goals. This country continues to live with a gap between what was proclaimed 250 years ago and what is practiced today. Al Jazeera's Bernard Smith went to what's known as Independence Hall, where that declaration was adopted, to see how it has defined a country.
In the hot, humid early summer of 1776, a group of colonial landowners and lawyers gathered here to put the finishing touches to a declaration that justified why they were rebelling against the British Crown. That Declaration of Independence was a foundation stone of the United States of America, its principles copied by liberation movements across the world. Central to the Declaration was the belief that all men are created equal, and that any government that rejects that principle can be replaced. That was incendiary talk at a time when the world was still mostly run by hereditary monarchs. Here at the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, a special exhibition highlights the Declaration's influence on liberation movements worldwide. French revolutionaries would draw inspiration for their own declaration. Simón Bolívar took these ideals across Latin America. When Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnamese independence in 1945, he quoted the American Declaration. And the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights is clearly influenced by it. There was, of course, a contradiction at the heart of the Declaration. Its authors were slave owners. All men were not, it seemed, created equal. Only in 1954, when the Supreme Court declared racial segregation in schools unconstitutional, did the US begin to address its racist laws. Finally, in the 1960s, with the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act, did the Declaration's core principles start to be fully realized, almost 200 years after it was signed. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Philadelphia.
Joined now by Jeremy Mayer, who is a professor at the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. Professor, thanks so much for joining us at this hugely important moment in this country. So we just heard there about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. Of course, hugely revolutionary and aspirational documents when they were written at the time. To what extent do you still think they are aspirational versus what has actually been achieved in these past 250 years?
Well, we've certainly come so far from that day in 1776 because, as your commenter noted, women and blacks and Native Americans were left out of that document. Asians, when they got here, were left out of that document. And America has gotten better almost every decade since then.
So when you hear the words, all men are created equal, has that come true yet?
It hasn't in a particular, not fully. We still have divisions of class. We still are riven by race. There's still a great deal of sexism in America, but we've come a long way. And it's important to note how we got to where we are. It's when each group got the right to vote that they began to dance the great dance of democracy.
Has progress, to what extent has progress been a straight line? Have there been regressions? Where do we stand right now?
So I think there have been regression points. I think that the status of black Americans was going backwards during part of the 19th century as slavery actually expanded. So it's never a clear line. Reconstruction was a great 11 years for black Americans, and then Jim Crow came in and they went backwards. History seldom progresses in a clear straight line.
Obviously, in the past few months, we have seen some extraordinary scenes across the country in terms of federal agents arresting people, both citizens and non-citizens alike. And then, of course, there's the whole debate over gerrymandering and redistricting. To what extent do you think people across this country, particularly minorities, are being disenfranchised?
Well, I think there is a problem that's going to happen because of the building over there, the Supreme Court, not the big Congress, but the Supreme Court building. They just ruled against majority-minority districts. So right now in Congress, black Americans have about equal representation of their percent of the population. There is a black exodus that is going to happen from the House of Representatives because of the ruling against majority-minority districts.
Of course, those midterms just a few months away. Professor Mayer, stay with me. Much more to discuss. The story of America remains inseparable from the people who have built it over the past 250 years. Indigenous communities, enslaved Africans who were brought here by force, generations of immigrants. The borough of Queens in New York is one of the most diverse communities in the country, where that story really continues to be written in many languages, in different cultures, and in various traditions. Heidi Ju Castro reports.
This was my great-grandfather's passport.
Anthony Serbone's great-grandfather arrived from Italy in 1936. He worked for the railroad, and 2 generations later, Serbone's parents opened an Italian restaurant in Queens, New York. Serbone still runs it with his son and mother.
I'm here as a testament to this country, giving everybody an opportunity, but you gotta work, you gotta keep your head down.
The family's old recipes haven't changed much over the years, but the neighborhood outside their door has. Like the rest of the country, the 280 square kilometers of Queens, New York was mostly white Europeans and their descendants until that began to change in 1965, when the U.S. opened its doors to more people from more nations. That set the course for Queens to become what it is today. Nearly half of the population here is foreign-born, and more than 160 languages are spoken. Roque Tomé came from Mexico as a child. He sold flowers on the streets before joining his brother's auto shop when he was just 17.
Our parents taught us to work and make sacrifices. This country is special. It makes us proud.
A few streets over is the Queens Chinatown, where Katrina Bryant and Devin Chung teach Kung Fu. Both are from families with blended roots.
My father's lineage he's been in America since America was created, and my mom only is 2 generations down. They would never have been able to meet if it wasn't for America.
250 years on the backs of immigrants and immigrant struggle. Everything, culture, tradition, working styles, working habits, everything, the stuff that we wear. This here was brought from immigrants.
Not everyone came to this land by choice. During its first century, America's economic might was powered by the blood and labor of enslaved Africans who survived 10 generations of bondage before their emancipation. This Juneteenth celebration in Queens is about the triumph of African Americans over that struggle. Linda Smith Harris's great-great-great-grandmother was enslaved in South Carolina.
He was literally executed. I don't know the circumstances or the story, but her offspring and all the people that came from her line still managed to thrive and survive.
Smith Harris is a psychiatrist. She says America is similar to her patients, still trying to cope with the wounds of collective trauma.
How do we overcome the suffering and not make that the only story about ourselves?
What is the story of America?
It's just that tension and fear of the unknown, of why people use chopsticks, why people pray, why people bow. And you have to learn that.
A story its people tell in many languages.
Yo soy americano.
我是美国人.
I am American.
All thrown into one big pot of diverse ingredients, not always melting, but at least mixed in the same soup that is America. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Queens, New York.
We're back now with Professor Jeremy Mayer. Professor, you heard Heidi there talk about a soup, not necessarily a melting pot. How does that square with we the people, with the framers' original intent for how they saw the population of this country?
Well, some of the founders did have that vision of all humanity, and others were burdened by racism. So America's always been a debate between, are we a white nation of Christians, or are we a nation that has no given religion and is open to people from everywhere of all races?
There's an extraordinary debate that has resurfaced in recent years since Trump took over, that whether diversity is this country's strength or not. To what extent do you think that has borne out and has proven true? And to what extent do you think that really is a schism in the country today?
So I think that diversity is how we advertised ourselves to the world. You look at the words at the base of the Statue of Liberty. It says, give me your tired, give me your poor, from every nation. At the same time, is diversity expensive? Does it cause civil discord and unrest? Sure. But most great American presidents and great American thinkers have said diversity is worth it.
The phrase American dream, of course, is not in these documents, but it's essentially what it implies, that people can come here from all around the world and succeed in the American dream. To what extent do you think that is true today?
I think it's still the hope. I think the American dream is not yet dead. But one of the things that I think about when I hear the American dream, I think of social mobility. The chance that somebody born poor will die in a rich man's house. And today, Western Europe has higher social mobility than the United States does.
You have spent a lot of time training American diplomats, young diplomats who are meant to go out into the world, represent the United States. How difficult has that been for you? How do you equip them with the answers that they're no doubt going to get when they go to far-flung lands?
Well, I've been training diplomats for 20 years for the United States, and the questions have gotten a lot harder. At the start, it was, how can we be more like you? And now, today, the questions our ambassadors and diplomats get are, is America still a democracy? Are you still what you thought you were? So what I tell the ambassadors is, go back to your roots, go back to what you believe about America, and keep the hope of the dream alive.
When you look at this celebration of 250 years, how does it compare to previous celebrations, previous birthdays for this country?
Well, we live in a polarized America between a blue and a red America, and this celebration is so much more politicized than, say, 1776 when I was 8 years old. Then we had Gerald Ford running for re-election. He tried to put himself in a good light, but he never made it about Republicans versus Democrats. But Donald Trump is doing that in his speeches, in his rallies. He's making this anniversary about him.
Yeah, it certainly does feel a lot more politically polarized. Professor Jeremy Mayer, George Mason University, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And that's all from me for now. I'm Alex Marquardt. We will be continuing our coverage of the 250 years of U.S. independence throughout today, as well as this week, as the U.S. celebrates its founding. I'll be back later. Until then, let's go back to Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.